Hi friends, don't mind this or my hair or anything. I just woke up not too long ago and I am just quickly hopping in to film this intro clip because it got lost somehow, but I wanted to say hi. This is my video talking about my favorite books of 2021. I was trying to say that I film it every year and never post it, so I'm actually posting it this year even though it is super late. I think that's really all I have to say. Hope you guys enjoyed the video and I will talk to you guys very soon. Not only in the next clip, but with another video. If I do ever film this video, I never end up posting it, and I wanted to make that a priority this year. Posting it, sharing it with you guys, giving you an official end of the year wrap up, especially because I was gone so much of this year and I didn't really share what I read when I was here. We're gonna start at the bottom and work our way up to number 1 because I did rank them and there are 10, and then I have 5 honorable mentions to talk to you about at the end of the video once we get through my top 10. So starting at the bottom is a book that I don't physically own even still, even though it is one of the best books that I have read this year, and that is Shipped by Angie Hockman. This is one of the first romances that I read earlier on in the year, I think around like February or March, and it wasn't necessarily that this plot was so new or inventive or that the characters were like none other than I had read before, but they were characters that I really enjoyed and related to at that time, and it just gave me something that I just really needed in the moment, and for that I appreciated it so much. It was one of the few books that I was so emotionally invested and attached to that still sticks out to me at the end of the year and every time that I pass it in the bookstore, even though I still haven't bought it. I know it's not a crazy whirlwind romance that everybody rates super highly, but for me, this was one of my best books of the year for sure. Couldn't stop talking about it when I read it, and I just feel like that is a true testament because I still think about it from time to time as well. Moving on to book number 9, we actually have a manga volume, and that is Kakegurui Volume 1 of Compulsive Gambler. This is a manga series that I fell in love with and also kind of showed me that I really enjoy horror manga. I'm pretty sure I read this for the Reese Readathon. I don't think I included it in my I Read 5 horror manga volumes video, but if you're interested in seeing that video, I also read a lot of great books throughout that, so I'll have it linked in the description. This one is amazing and quickly became one of my favorite manga series of all time, so I'm very thankful for this one. I'm still reading them and I will continue to be reading this series in the new year. Sometimes I pick up a manga and it's way off the mark for me, but this one was the exact opposite case where it just really hit the spot, and I'm so thankful that I read it. I also made so many of my friends read it as well, and that just makes me very proud. Number 8 may come as a surprise to you, not that it's on my favorites list, but mostly that it's so low on the favorites list. It was really hard for me to rate these books when I was ranking them because they all hold such a big place in my heart, but they're all so vastly different. It's not like I read entirely romance, and that's what this list is comprised of. So it might be different, but I did the best I could with the ranking. And at number 8, we have The House in the Cerulean Sea by TJ Klune. This I read / listened to on audiobook, and I fell in love with each and one of the characters, and it was just so good. While I loved it so much, there were a couple of things that just felt lacking to me, and I just felt disconnected, and it may very well be the time that I read it at that was the cause of that. But either way, I still really enjoyed this, and it definitely brought me so much happiness at a time where I was kind of feeling meh, and it was a very chaotic period of my life. So for this one, for the fact that it gave me so much peace and laughter and joy at a time where I almost felt so overwhelmed and overly sensitized to everything that I was already feeling, for sure, this is one of my favorite books of the year. Coming in at number 7 is another one that I read in March and couldn't shut up about, and that is Kingdom of the Wicked by Kerri Maniscalco. This one I buddy read with Rylan, and that was a really special experience for me, and I think contributed to like why I love it so much, purely because I had so much fun buddy reading and talking about it with her. It was definitely one of my reading highlights for 2021. I can't wait to continue on with the sequel in 2022, which I guess it is when you're watching this, because I'm filming this on New Year's Eve. I loved this book. I loved falling in love with the Princes of Hell and all of the trickery and the whodunit, and there were elements of this book that were certainly not perfect, and I am fully aware of them and recognize them, but so much of it worked for me, and again brought me so much joy and squealing and fangirling with Rylan that I was just like, yes, I have to include this. This top 10 list is like my highlight reel of my reading highlight reel of 2021, and I would be remiss if I didn't mention this one as part of that. Coming in at number 6 is another book that I don't physically own, but interestingly enough, I read for a video that I never posted because it was at such a chaotic point in my life, and that was supposed to be the book where I read all of Elle's favorites, and that one was Heartbones by Colleen Hoover. I did not expect to like this book really at all, not because I don't trust Elle's taste in books, that wasn't what it was at all, but it was more so that Colleen Hoover's more recent work had fallen a bit flat for me, and I was really nervous to read it and potentially not like as much of her other stuff, because I knew that Elle had read a couple of Colleen Hoover books, but I don't think she had read as much of her backlist as I had. So I was like, ugh, maybe, like, I don't know, because I know that Colleen Hoover can do better than this, if that makes sense. But I read it anyway because it's one of Elle's favorites, so I did it and I loved it. I'm pretty sure I cried at this. It was not at all what I was expecting, and it was a total whirlwind in true Coho fashion. I have read so much of Colleen Hoover, and this is one of her hallmarks for sure, where it was just very Colleen Hoover, very good, very tragic, but also dramatic, and not to be romanticized because it wasn't healthy, but as a book it was just so much fun that I had to mention it, and it gave me such an emotional reaction that, again, this list wouldn't be complete without it. Switching gears a little bit, we are going to talk about a couple of my favorite thrillers of the year. Coming in at number 5, we have none other than The Silent Patient by Alex Michaelides. This one was another one for not necessarily that same video, but that same video series where I was supposed to read all of my very close friends' favorite books. So I was supposed to read Elle's, Stasia's, and Rylan's. And this one was for Rylan's video. I loved The Silent Patient so much. Rylan reads way more thrillers than I do, so I wasn't shocked that, since she is more of a seasoned thriller reader than I am, that this was amazing. But I had heard so much hype about it and it sounded really slow to me, and it was the exact opposite. This was another instance where I had someone to talk about it with. It was someone that I worked with, so they're not on the online space, but it was still so fun, like, as I was reading, to be like, oh my god, this just happened. And she was like, yeah, keep going, it gets even crazier. And it was a really fun experience because I read the last 200 pages in like 3 hours, and I do not read that quickly. I think people think I read faster than I do because I read a lot, but I don't read that quickly. This one I read quickly and I couldn't stop. My hands were sweating. I think I even posted it on my Instagram story. I'll post a picture here if I can find it. I loved this one. Didn't see the ending coming at all. I thought it was amazing, and it definitely kind of spurred on my love of thrillers and my intrigue with that genre and trying to find more that I love just as much as I loved this one. Another thriller that I read per Stasia's recommendation was The One by John Mars. I still have yet to watch the Netflix TV show, and I desperately need to do that. And I hate that I have a mass market paperback. I just hate mass market paperbacks. But anyway, this was a thriller that I had set down the year before and wasn't that interested in, but I tried it again because Rylan and Stasia, but mostly Stasia, convinced me and sold me on it that it was amazing, and she loved it. She read it in a day. And this is one where at first it didn't really seem like a thriller, and I didn't understand why it was categorized as such until I kept reading, and then I couldn't stop and I was addicted to it. I loved my reading experience with this, and there were so many times where I had chills and then the chapter would change and we would move on, or I would literally be sitting there like for an entire chapter. And granted, the chapters are not long, but it was still like 3 minutes of my mouth just hanging open all at once, and I loved it. It was incredible, and my time flew by while I was listening to this audiobook. We are now in the top 3, so this is when it gets a little dicey. We're talking about my top 3 books of the year. I might get overly passionate and excited, but these books deserve it, in my humble opinion. Coming in at number 3 is one that I'm sure a ton of people are gonna disagree with me on, but it was one of the first books that I had read in a while because it was after the period of time of like 2-3 months where I wasn't reading really anything. So that definitely played a factor. And number 2, it just struck such an emotional chord with me to the point where I was literally sobbing, and my boyfriend had to hold me and soothe me as I was like crying and reading this book. And that is none other than The Hawthorne Legacy by Jennifer Lynn Barnes. Earlier this year, I also read The Inheritance Games, which is the first book, and had I not read this one and loved it as much as I did, The Inheritance Games would have been on this list. But this one just did something more for me, and at its heart, there is a love story in it, and if you've read the first one, it's probably not the love story that you're expecting, but reading it and how forbade it is in this book just really hit me. And for one reason or another, I really needed that catharsis, and this book gave it to me. So number 3, The Hawthorne Legacy, I was sobbing, and not many books can elicit that strong of an emotion or a reaction from me, no matter what it is, unless I hate it. Coming in at number 2, we have a book that completely took over the book world, both on and off of BookTube. I feel like even people who don't create or like involve themselves in all of the bookish online creation stuff like BookTok and Bookstagram and stuff, even they read and loved this book, and that's none other than The Love Hypothesis by Ali Hazelwood. I loved this book so completely, and every ounce of hype that it has gotten is deserved. This book also made me so giddy and excited, and unfortunately, I do not remember what I was saying because my camera cut out so kindly. Oh, I think I was saying that I felt everything that the characters were feeling right along with the characters. And I loved it so much. I annotated it, I had so much fun reading it, and I read it in the time, again, where I was kind of in a reading slump. I didn't know what I wanted to read or what I was in the mood to read. I picked this up on a whim because I had heard so many things about it, and it was definitely the right decision. It also reminded me why I love annotating books so much, how much closer I can feel to the book and with the characters if I'm annotating the book. It was just a much needed reminder. Then, coming in for the number 1 spot is honestly a book that I forgot that I read this year, not because I forgot that I read this book ever, I just forgot that it happened in 2021 because I feel like 2021 was such a long yet simultaneously whirlwind of a year that it's like, wow, all of that happened this year. And I read one of my favorite books of all time in 2021, Court of Silver Flames by Miss Sarah J. Maas. This book had me crying, had me laughing, had me angry, had me on the edge of my seat. It took me through an entire roller coaster of emotions, but most of all, it made me feel seen with some of my mental health issues, specifically my depression, and how isolating and ostracizing that can really make a person feel. But it also provided what like an outside person can feel when someone that they love is dealing with depression. I feel like those two things aren't represented well when paired all the time in books, because a lot of times it's like a teenager and then a parent getting frustrated with them. And that is a very valid and real depiction, but it's also not the full extent of it. And I feel like this book did a really good job of doing that justice and what it looks like to be on both sides, because I definitely have experienced depression, but also loved ones have experienced depression, and it was cathartic to have both of those things represented just pages apart from each other without having to flip to an entirely different book. I fully loved, and it was also a huge accomplishment for me to read. It's the longest book that I have literally ever read, and I know that there are longer books out there, even by Sarah J Maas, so obviously I haven't read them all, but accomplishing this book and reading it after awaiting it for so long also made me feel something. And again, it was at a time where I wasn't really sure of what I was feeling, how I was feeling, some situations going on in my life that I didn't know how to fully process, and this allowed me to process them and escape from them at the same time, which was mind-boggling but much needed. So for this, I owe this book a lot, and it's one that I very frequently flip back through and look at the quotes that I have underlined and marked because they just mean so much to me. Those were my top 10 books of the year, but now we have some honorable mentions because, again, I still need to talk about them because I enjoyed them so much. So we have 5 that I'm gonna quickly run through. Not gonna talk in too much detail about each of them like I did with all of these books, but I still want to chat. So first we have Louisiana Longshot by Miss Jana DeLeon, which is one that I have loved and haven't really shut up about since having read it. This is the first book in the Miss Fortune series. It's a cozy mystery series that I am really enjoying going through. It was just so much fun and exactly what I needed. I read it while I was in quarantine for COVID over Christmas and just the general December holiday season at the end of the year, and it really sucked, and it was a great distraction from the isolation that I was feeling when I couldn't be with my family. Then we have The Seance Tea Party by Remina Yi. This was another one that I did not expect to love nearly as much as I did, and during the first half of it I definitely wasn't sure how I was feeling, but by the second half it was definitely a book that I wish I had read when I was Laura's age, who is the main character. It just reminded me and filled a place in my heart of when I was transitioning from middle school to high school, and I didn't want to grow up yet either, but everybody else was, so I felt like I had to, and I ended up rushing that process for no reason. And then when I realized I had fully gone past a stage that maybe I wasn't ready to leave yet, I felt heartbroken. So reading this book reminded me of that, and I honestly almost cried. Rarely happens in books, but even rarer found is that it's a graphic novel that evokes a good cry session from me. We have another thriller that I read and loved this year, and that is The Last Thing He Told Me by Laura Dave, I'm pretty sure. This one is a thriller, but it's also a love story. Honestly, Chandler Ainsley read it for, I think, maybe her book of the month video that she did during Chanmas or something like that, and she described it so well in that, and that's honestly what made me want to pick it up. Yeah, I read it and I still haven't stopped thinking about it, so maybe it should have made it to the top 10, but if I had to slot it, it would probably be number 11, just because of how much I enjoyed it and how much I got out of it. It really grabbed and more so held my attention, which audiobooks have not been doing for me lately. So I was very grateful to have read this one and loved it as much as I did. Literally, I was reading it during an open at work and people were trying to talk to me, and I was literally like, can you all please shut up? Like, I like all of you and I don't mind talking to you, but this is important stuff that I have going on here. So I'm gonna need you to cool it, and I will get back to you when I finish this book. Then we have Female of the Species by Mindy McGinnis. This one is an old one, but a good one, and it showed me that I really like female characters that are angry, because sometimes people are angry, and I was definitely at a point this year where I was livid and so angry about so much, and I read this during that time and it was just like, yeah, this is what I needed. I am mad, and it's okay to be mad. Like, you don't need to apologize for it, and you know, if you secretly want some vengeance, so long as you don't act on it, here is your catharsis. Here you go. So that's kind of what it felt like the universe was giving to me, and I greatly appreciated it. And lastly, for my honorable mentions, we have In 5 Years by Rebecca Searle, or Surley, I think it's Searle. This was actually the first book that I read this year. Another one that I got from Chandler Ainsley's channel, but this was from her worst books of the year. I went into it thinking that it was going to be bad because it was in her worst or most disappointing books of the year. And it was another one that fully made me sob while I was listening to the audiobook. I cried so hard while I was listening to this and I loved it. But it wasn't enough to like stick with me and for me to remember much throughout the year. Like I definitely still remember everything that happened, but I think I just needed to cry. And that book gave me that. So this would probably be like number 15 of all of these books. It would be of the lowest of the honorable mentions, but I still needed to mention it, obviously. There we have it. My top 10 favorite books of the year, as well as 5 honorable mentions. I had such a wonderful reading year, and it's interesting because it was definitely my weirdest reading year. And so for a long time, I felt like it was bad, but reflecting in this way, it definitely made me appreciate all of the books and the actual year itself much more than I have been. So I'm very glad that I did this, and I hope that you guys enjoyed it too. I hope you're all doing well reading mentally and otherwise. Be sure to let me know down in the comments some of your favorite reads of the year. If I haven't read them, maybe I'll do a video where I read all your favorite books of 2021. That could be fun. But other than that, I love you all so much. I hope that you guys enjoyed this video, and I really hope to see you all in my next one. Bye, guys.